The Ice Boomerang actually has the second strongest knockback of any boomerang, at 8.5, despite being obtainable in the very early game. It is only beat by the late game Paladin Hammer, which edges it out by a whole 0.5 knockback. Although landmines deal 250 damage, Terraria's damage randomization, along with NPC's built-in defense, means they cannot always be killed in one hit. As the sun sets on your first day of your playthrough of Get Fixed Boy, all your NPCs will instantly die. This is quite sad. It also means that it is impossible to obtain Terragrim early on the sea via the princess, as you can't get a blood moon before the first nightfall. On For the Worthy, the destroyer is 1,171 foot 6 inches or 357 meters long. This is by far the longest Terraria boss. The baby truffle could canonically be the truffle's children, as a painting of the baby truffle is given the name My Son and is sold by the truffle. The amount of confetti you can create is limited. If you use a zenith and a party flask on some target dummies, for example, there will be a point where confetti no longer spawns. This is obviously to prevent your frame rate from dying. If you set the velocity of a spear or short sword to a very high number, their range will become so large that they begin to act more like a boomerang. And, not gonna lie, it looks pretty cool, especially with trolling weapons like the Ghastly Glaive. There are actually 4 homing ammunitions in the game, those being the Chlorophyte Bullet, Nano Bullet, Chlorophyte Arrow, and Crystal Dart. The latter 3 can only smart bounce though, and aren't as versatile as the Chlorophyte Bullet. The Rotted Fork is called the Chinurareta Naginata on the Japanese Old Console version of Terraria, which roughly means blood-smeared Naginata, where Naginata is a kind of Japanese spear. This means in that version there are 2 Naginatas, not just one like we have over here. Unlike the Japanese version, the Chinese version has a much more literal translation, Fu Cha, which literally is rotten fork. The true Eye of Cthulhu's idle noises and attack noises are slightly different. The Terrarian is 5 foot tall without hair. If you use a jousting lance on the mount, you can get the mount to preserve its full running speed while going backwards, which looks kinda funky. The Shield of Cthulhu, like some other attacks like the Cactus Armor's Thorns or the Lawnmower, does not have its damage attacks randomized like most attacks in Terraria. It always does 30 damage regardless of attack, barring crits of course. There are 3 melee weapons in Terraria which have a use time of 8, or 7.5 attacks per second. These are the Fetid Bognox, Psycho Knife, and Bladed Glove. However, since the Fetid Bognox have a 75% melee speed reduction, the Psycho Knife a 66% reduction, and the Bladed Glove only a 50% reduction, the Bladed Glove is theoretically the fastest melee weapon in the game, even if it's the weakest of them all. In 1.3, the Space Gun gained an upper fin. Due to their slow velocity, the Book of Skulls probably has the most zealous homing ability in all of Terraria, with the ability to easily do a full 180 behind the player. You can click instruments as quickly as you want in Terraria, meaning with a high enough click speed, you're basically guaranteed to be able to annoy your friends. This is despite their stated use time of 12. The Falcon Blade has the light red rarity, which is typically reserved for early hard mode weapons. This is despite it being found in iron crates, which can be found before any bosses are even defeated. The Metal Detector technically drops from both the Lost Girl and the Nymph, as it is possible to kill the former in one hit from a long range with a weapon such as the Zenith. All hammers with 70% hammer power or more are able to break walls in one hit. After this, hammer power is basically a useless metric, barring the fact that you need 80% to break altars in hard mode. Converse to every other ore hammer which seems rounded, the silver hammer's shading seems to implicate that the head has a square shape, not a rounded one. The Stardust Fragment's tooltip is entrancing particles revolve around this fragment. There's only one particle. At least the Vortex Fragment is honest about its rolliness. In 1.4.3, you used to get all blurry when you sat on a mount, which was a bit out of place. In 1.4.4, they fixed it, so now you only become blurry when you decide to tilt on your mount instead of all the time. This de-blur is only temporary though, as it disappears after a bit. It's really weird. When 1.4 first dropped, the pirate ship was insanely overpowered, with a speed equivalent to that of the Shrimpy Truffle in water, despite being obtainable before any hard mode bosses. This was nerfed to the next update for obvious reasons. You can increase the chance to rain by killing ladybugs. How is this related? I have no clue. Pigranatas are derived from the word pigron, a Terraria enemy, and pinata, a kind of party ornament. When put together though, the word omits the enye. So is it pronounced pigranata or pigraniata? How do you think? Also, it's called the Cerdi Dragonata in Spanish, so you don't have that to go off either. The Pigron mount used to have 4 periods before the end of the buff icon, but has since been fixed to have a proper 3 periods, or an ellipsis. Despite the chain guillotines only showing 2 guillotines, you can actually have 3 firing simultaneously, if one is retracted. 4 enemies lack bestiary entries, those being the Pirate's Curse, Spiked Slime, Golden Slime, and Jungle Slime. It is because these enemies are impossible to spawn in certain types of worlds. The Timeless Traveler's set and Floret Protector set are the only 2 of the Journeys and Vanity contest winners to not have sprites for both available genders. The Beetle Husk is the only non-brown thing that drops from the Jungle Temple. Seriously, everything else is brown or in some shade of brown color. Geysers fire every 3.33 seconds or 200 ticks. If you set the damage value of any weapon to 0, it will show up similarly to a non-weapon, as it won't display any damage-related stats. However, if that weapon fires ammunition, it can still deal damage, as long as the ammunition still has a damage value, that is. If you set both to 0, the projectile will simply pass through the enemy. Shimmer is finite until defeating Moonlord, as it cannot be placed in a bucket until post-Moonlord. It also cannot be duplicated using a setup similar to this, as that has since been fixed, and pumps no longer duplicate liquid either. In this case, it is truly finite. On Expert mode, Golem drops triple the Beetle Husks he does in normal mode, meaning that you are guaranteed a Beetle set on your first fight if you play on that difficulty or higher. The 3DS version of Terraria has a content version between 1.2.1 and 1.2.4. For example, it includes Duke Fishron, who was added in 1.2.4, but not the Lizard Furnace, which was added in 1.2.3. It even includes some 1.3 features like bonus drops from Slimes or Frost Moon and Pumpkin Moon banners. On mobile version, all Okram trophies became Lunatic Cultist trophies in 1.3. Quite weird considering Okram is a pre-Plantera boss. Even weirder is that this change didn't take place on console until 1.4, and console players only got 10 gold instead of a Lunatic Cultist trophy. Since Terraria fishing probability is calculated via integer division, each rarity tier's probability graphs come out looking like this staircase instead of a smooth linear line. You might remember this type of graph from your Algebra 1 classes. The texture pack I use is called Foundry and Alchemy, and the shaders are fancy lighting and lights and shadows. They are always in the description. The Nettle Burst used to have a descriptive tooltip, summons a Thorn Spear, but after it was given 10 armor penetration in 1.4.1, it was instead changed to show that instead. The Dungeon Guardian's Bestiary entry only requires you to defeat Skeletron to get it. The Blood Rainbow only rains clouds if you have Blood and Goroth, which looks kinda unique too. And finally, your capacity to lifesteal is slightly lower in Expert mode versus normal mode, 30 per second instead of 36 per second. That's the 20th and perhaps soon to last installation of this series. Hopefully you enjoyed this and the other episodes. If you aren't subscribed to the channel, I highly recommend doing that if you enjoy my content. Either way though, thank you for watching and good day and goodbye.